Hello, and welcome to InterAction Presents This Is Where We Play, the podcast. I'm your host, Hilary Ladd, and I'll be joining you here each week with an interview with one of our students, past and present, some of their parents, teaching artists, members of our community, basically anybody who's got something to say about how InterAction has had an impact on their lives as artists and creative people. Enjoy. Trying again. Hello. You just have to use your actor voice.
All right. Hello, Hilary.
Project from the diaphragm.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Hilary. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It's 2022.
It is.
I wrote that down this morning, and
Did you? I haven't had to yet.
It felt weird.
Yeah.
It felt like I was in the future.
Though for me, back in like September, October, I was already thinking. It's kind of like when I'm coming up to my birthday.
Yeah.
I start thinking I'm already that age.
I
So
asked Evan the other day. I was like, "How old am I?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyways,
We're there.
34.
34.
I know.
Wow.
Yeah, and I've been here for 12 years now.
That's amazing.
Isn't that so crazy?
Well, it's not amazing that you've been here 12 years. It's amazing
that's been
everything's
12
happened.
years already.
Well, it is, and I've been thinking a lot about it as I've been listening to the other podcasts, and how, because you're referencing a lot of like the time that you've been here in this building, so
Yeah.
the last 11 or 12 years, and it seems like it's gone by quickly, but if you look at everything that was jam-packed, it also could be 20 years in this building, right? Because of all the work that's been done. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So tell me about the time before I got here. Tell me about the first 8 years.
First 8 years. I don't know where to start. Because again, it was 8 years, but it could have been
It could have been 20.
30. Yeah.
30.
Yeah. Sometimes it felt like that.
So
It
you
was-
were a new mom.
I was a new mom. The story, sort of the mythology of it, but it's the true story, is that I came back for what was supposed to be 9 months, and it's 20 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah. Do you want to know the origin story?
Yes.
The origin story.
Tell me everything.
So the story goes that, well, it should probably go back to 1982, really, because in 1982, I was 12, so figure out that age. My brother was 10, and we had nothing to do one summer. And my mother, who had she was a visual artist, an art teacher, really encouraged us to do a lot of creative things because that's how we were raised. We used to put on backyard plays and puppet shows and things like that beforehand. She saw that we were at that age where if we didn't find something to do, we would find things to do, and they might not be the right things to do. So she asked us if we wanted to put on a play. And that's where it started. So she started what was really just supposed to be a one summer project called the Children's Drama Workshop. And it lasted from 1982 to 2001 when InterAction started. So for her, and it was interesting, it's very much a St. John story where we were going to put on a play. She took us to the Lancaster Mall Library. We found a book of plays. The book we chose, or the play we chose, which was called Case for Two Detectives, we chose because my best friend Susan McLeod discovered that this particular play, it was an anthology of murder mysteries or detective mysteries for kids. The lead character's name was Susan. So that's why we chose that play. And so word got out. I remember being at the co-op with my mom a couple of weeks later, and a couple of other moms stopping my mother saying, "Hey, we heard that you're doing a play. Can our kids join?" You know, that's the way things happen, especially West Side's
West Side, St.
West Side,
John.
yeah, the West Side Story. So, so it started off as just with 4 kids, and then it was our neighborhood, and then it was the full West Side, and then eventually there were kids coming in from St. George and Sussex and St. Martin's and things like that. So, yeah, so that's where it started. And so when Mike and I moved back with the 2 babies, we moved back Boxing Day of 2000, so 2001. Was really when it started. And Mom was, I was trying to figure this out, around 73 or 74, still running what had become 2 companies, one for younger kids and one for teenagers. And she was it was still very grassroots. She always kept it that way. It was her and my dad, some other parents helping out with costumes and sets and things like that. But I said to her, let me do a show while I'm here. And for me, I had to do a show because it's really, I think you go through the same thing when you've got kids, you're a mom, your focus is there. But if you're an artist or a performer or a creative person, you can't stop doing that. It's just it's who you are.
Otherwise, it becomes misdirected energy.
100%. I was actually reading things about that this morning. 100%. And really, for me to be a fun, creative, attentive mom, I needed to be exercising this other side of me. Mm-hmm. So that's where it started, and it's been 20 years. Wow.
Well, you answered all of my questions already. I'm just kidding. We barely scratched the surface. This is
and I was just going to mention now that I'm just thinking as we're talking that started in September, the summer of '82, and I'm just realizing now that it's 2022. So there's a significant reunion show that has to happen with all of those kids that were in the Children's Drama Workshop. Yeah. Most of whom are still here, and
Can I write the music for it?
You sure can.
Okay, cool.
We'll have to talk to Angela Campbell too, because she was in that show.
Oh my gosh!
And I think she has a good venue that maybe we could use for that.
She does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's always so many ideas.
There is. Yeah. Yeah.
What's it been like to step back from things?
It's been really cool. It's been really cool. When I took this other job with the city, or when I was thinking about this other job with the city before I was even offered it, and I was going back and forth about it, I remember talking to Mike about it, and he said, what's this? This is life-changing on so many different levels, not just for me, but for people here and for him and the kids. And I said to him, well, I wouldn't walk away if I didn't think it was ready to
continue
on its own. Yeah. And so it's interesting because it happened the same time my kids were reaching adulthood, right? Mm-hmm. So in that case, and you probably see it with little ones as well, there's the times you do need to step back, as hard as it might be, mm-hmm. because it's the only way kids will grow, companies will flourish and things like that. Yeah. So I mean, it's been, sort of standing on the sidelines watching. There's been growing pains, which are good, because I mean, it's a big part of working in a creative industry is problem solving and figuring out how things work. Exactly.
Creative problem solving.
But what's been incredible is to see how the company has flourished and how people have come together, especially in light of the pandemic. Mm. Because with my new job with the city, when the March and April of 2020, I started talking to other people in my role across Canada and across North America, really, looking at the landscape and how arts organizations were coping and how, especially arts education companies were working, because, a company like this depends on kids in a room with a teaching artist. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to what sort of the plight of what everybody else was going through across the sector. And then I was looking at what was happening here and seeing how quickly Chuck and the team were able to pivot to put things online, mm-hmm. and how important it was to still have that going, and how it happened immediately, right? I mean, it was
kind of a blur for me because mm-hmm. I started my second maternity leave when you started your job with the city.
Right.
And then that maternity leave was supposed to end the day that they shut schools down.
Yeah.
And so it just never ended.
Yeah.
And I was quite out of touch.
Yeah.
With what had been going on here for the last few years, because mm-hmm. I'd just been home with 2 little kids. Yeah. And now I'm here again. And That's it's right. I'm here but as far as the pivot during COVID goes, I had nothing to do with that.
No, well, I mean, you were doing what you needed to do.
I was doing yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I came back and felt like I could just jump in and do the things that I was good at.
Yeah.
And not have to like pick up pieces that I'm not good at, which is like my tendency. I'm just like, something needs to be done, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But it's, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I just know, because Sophie still works here in the summertime. And actually when university closed down and she came home and started doing all of her university courses for like a year and a half because she's doing an acting class or acting program. So our living room was the ballet studio, her bedroom was her voice studio, and sometimes she would come in here when the building would be closed, but she'd use the dance studio to do classes online. She started teaching again. So she was doing, voice lessons. She was taking her own voice lessons from university, but then she was also teaching voice lessons or teaching from our living room.
Yeah.
So, but it was, as much as I was not here, it was like InterAction had moved into my home, because I would walk, by her room and I'd hear 14 little kids playing an improv game from her bedroom,
right,
on Zoom. So anyway, what I mean by that is I was able to see how, even though I wasn't here all the time, I was able to see how things evolved and pivoted.
Which is kind of a really nice gift.
Yeah, it was really neat. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's just so much. Yeah. What's something that you've learned about yourself as an artist as you've kind of left this creative world and in something more structured and political? Like, what is that?
Governmental.
Yes. Yeah. So, yeah. How has that been for you, like, on a daily practice kind of basis?
It's interesting, and it's twofold, because when my full-time gig was arts education, we would work with young people and not so young people who were doing plays or doing music or dance or whatever it was, improv, all that type of thing. And the focus was never that they were going to go on and do this professionally. If they did it professionally, it's icing on the cake. Mm-hmm. But really it was about the skills that they're learning. And you've talked to other people in the podcast about this, right?
Yeah.
It's the skills that they're learning, the creative problem solving, the working together. For me, it's always the, theater is an excellent example of you are given a project, you're given a group of people, and there's no way to, other than right now during a pandemic, the curtain's going to go up at a certain time, and you better be ready for the audience, right? So that can be applied anywhere, right? And so with my role now, I'm very project oriented and work on different committees and things like that, but we're always working towards a final project. Yeah. And so, I mean, it's the creative problem solving, and it's working with people and things like that. So I still get to exercise that part of my brain. I know I said it was twofold, and I can't remember what the second part I was going to mention was.
Like, I'm curious about, like, your artist self.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not that I washed my hands and walked away,
No,
right?
No,
right?
You couldn't.
No. So, I mean, I'm still writing.
Yeah.
I'm still directing.
Yeah.
I'm happiest. Well, I have to be careful about this because I'm happy a lot of places.
Yes.
But I think my happiest place is being in a studio in a creative environment. Well, of course, I'm going to be in a creative, but teaching a new improv game or playing a new improv game and seeing that discovery that I have and the people I'm with have, that's still being exercised all the time for me. So it might not be my full-time. Well, it's become
the lens through which you see life.
100%. 100%. Yeah.
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 I bet that's really helpful when it comes to, like, dealing with people who don't necessarily understand the arts, because you might have some creative ways of helping them to discover some new perspective.
Yeah. And it's not like I left a performing arts environment to go and work in something that's completely not arts based. I mean, that's what I do. And for me, one of the best parts of my job is being able to meet with people who are emerging artists or people who have the spark of an idea, and they come to me and they say, there's no way this can happen in St. John, but I have this idea. And then I hear them out. I'm like, oh no. So and oftentimes it's, let me tell you what my journey was to get to create this place, and the fact that it can be done here. And one of the special things about doing things in St. John is that I don't want to say that there is a lot happening here, but a lot of it is grassroots that's led to professional organizations. And so there's no cookie cutter that people have to, there's no, this is the example of what you need to do. Yeah. Instead, it's, let me tell you what I did and how, what the hustle was, in a good way, the creative hustle to build a company was. And then, people can use that to do their own things. And I mean, everybody seems to be very inclusive and supportive of each other here. So that's really, if I have an opportunity to work with especially a young artist or not so young artist who comes to me with my role in the city and says, I have this idea, how, do you think it can happen? I'm always like, oh, there's my creative problem solving. Right. Yeah, let's figure this out.
Yeah, so we collaborated on this Spotlight project last year, and as we were debriefing that, we were realizing that the kind of the biggest pitfall of of execution from idea is everything in between, and how it would be so great to be able to have a stronger, more official network to help support artists on the daily with the actual messiness of it all, because it's not because like you said, there's no cookie cutter way and everybody just has to figure it out for themselves.
Exactly.
And that's so hard.
It's hard, and it's such an important part of the process. Yeah. Right?
It is the process.
It is the process, yeah. And I think that oftentimes, because I also talk to a lot of people who, and I mean, I was probably guilty of this as a young artist as well, especially when I was working in Halifax, and I would go and work with different companies that had been around 15, 20, 30 years, and I didn't realize what it took to get to be, from that people sitting around drinking a cup of coffee saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? Yeah. To the quote unquote empire that they had built in my mind. Yeah. But now that I've been on the other side of that and I see it, I realize that people don't realize how difficult it actually is, but there's so much support out there for people to do it. And I don't just mean financial support, because there is. There's grants and sponsorships and things like that. But it's believing in the ideas that you have as an artist, and most people know that they're important and know where they fit within the city or society. But it's the belief that you can go out and share that idea with other people and they're going to accept it. Because also as an artist, that's a hard thing, right? Yeah. I wrote a song. I don't know if I want to share it with anybody, right?
No, there's a lot of self-doubt. Yeah. And so full circle moment, but everything that I've talked to the other people that I've talked to on the podcast, it all comes down to this confidence muscle memory that they've built from their time here, right, and the exercises that they went through, and doing any improv games and having to think on their feet and having to listen to respond, and understanding their body and their breath and all of that. It's kind of phenomenal.
It's huge. And it's why I did this in the first place. Yeah. I mean, I knew growing up doing theater, I knew that I wanted to do something with theater people. I also knew at a young age, probably around 15 or 16, I remember I talked to the kids that I work with about this moment all the time, where I was on stage, I was about 16, rehearsing a play. And I was thinking the whole time about how the audience was going to see what we were doing. And like I remember who I was on. It's funny, we were at the King George Hall of the museum, because there used to be a theater there, rehearsing this play. And I remember looking at the other kids thinking, they're really, really into what we're doing up here. And I'm much more interested in what's, like, how they're doing. I was basically thinking as a director.
Right.
But I had no idea of what that meant, right? Yeah. And then going away to university, going to Dal and studying theater and talking, and being in classes. And I had a great professor who took me aside one day and said, I think you're thinking as a director and a playwright. And I said, I think I am too, but no one talks about that because everybody wants to be on stage. Yeah. And so, so through that, because suddenly the focus wasn't on me anymore. Like it wasn't about how I was, obviously I had to present myself to be able to do what I'm doing, but it wasn't so much about the process that I was going through. It was more of, how do I get everybody else working together? How do we tell the story? We're storytellers. How do we do that? The actors come with the skills. The technical people come with their skills. And my job was to basically make them feel as confident and as empowered and as connected as possible to get this vehicle off the ground to an audience. So, so when you're talking about the kids saying that they feel confident and they can present themselves and things like that, I think that if I had come to the role that I'm doing as an actor, it would be a different process for me than if I than the skill set that I brought. Yeah. Not saying that actors can't teach theater, because that's not what I'm talking about.
No,
but it was that's not at all what I'm saying.
No, but you came to it from a place of like, let's tell stories the best way possible.
100%. Yeah. My favorite thing growing up was, and I probably drove the adults crazy that I was with because I grew up in a multi-generational family, so there were people of all ages, people in their 90s right down to little kids, in my house all the time. And my favorite thing was to go up to people that, this is, my grandmother's best friend. We haven't seen her for a long time. And I'd walk over and say, tell me a story about when you were a little kid. That was my jam, right?
I bet they loved it.
Some of them did. Some of them were awkward about it, but they eventually did. And they realized that I wasn't going to judge them. I just wanted to hear these stories, right? Yeah. So I've always looked at theater as storytelling, and I've been seeking out those stories since I was a wee little baby.
Yeah, I think about doing I just want to be clearer when I explain what interaction is to people sometimes, because what I want to say is we help create confident humans. Yeah. Who go on to confidently move through life and its problems.
Yeah. And I mean, exactly. And the one thing that was always different with interaction is that there was no competitive focus whatsoever.
Well, and that's the thing. And so it's, even when I say it's non-competitive, that's like a light bulb moment for people.
Yeah. Because and especially when I started the company here, 20 years ago, the only real thing to compare what I was doing, because it was new. I mean, my mom had her theater company, but the focus was very different. I was running classes rather than rehearsals, and I brought a lot of, I had been working professionally in Halifax with different theater practitioners and watching what people were doing, but I also came from an academic background because I was teaching acting at Dal, and so I was very much process-based and non-competitive, and had a lot of training in things like, my degree is in applied theater developmental drama, which is using the arts not necessarily to put on a Broadway musical, but focus on the people in the process that they're going through. So it can be anything from mediation and facilitation to trauma therapy to, it's basically community development, which is what InterAction really is. And so when I was trying to figure out, do we become a business? Do we become a nonprofit or a registered charity? How does InterAction fit within this world of St. John? And not everybody, but most people I talked to knew, okay, kids' activities are competitive across the board. Cheerleading's competitive, hockey's competitive, dance schools are running competitive programs, and that's great if that's where your jam is, and a lot of people have that jam. I'm a very competitive person. I get that, right? But I knew that the focus that I wanted to have, the core of InterAction couldn't be about creating art for trophies and medals and first place and second place and things like that.
It's just not part of it.
That's great for other people, but it wasn't what I was trying. I wanted an alternative to that, really. So, so when I talk to people about what InterAction is, I talk about it being an arts organization focused on community development, and that it's not competitive. It's art for art's sake. And and then I talk about the people who are here, like you.
So what have your success metrics been? You know what I mean? Like, how do you measure that?
Well, it's still here.
That is, yeah. Number one.
It's still thriving.
Yeah.
I am a success matrix for it. I think that it's a combination of the feedback that we get that InterAction gets after a show, or after a project wraps up. But it's also talking to people who are now speech pathologists or nurses or stay-at-home parents, or the thousands of people that went through InterAction, and what the feedback that they give. So I mean, you can't, there's not a wall full of trophies and ribbons and things like that, but there are these people who went through, like you said, who are
like legacies.
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah, they feel good about their time here, and they feel good about themselves now, and they're still friends. And that's the other thing. Like, I hear it, like when Ben O'Neill was talking about like the friendships he created, and he's still friends with those people. So that's all right. Yeah, it's just a safe place, really, for people to come and be and learn to love themselves and 100%. Accept themselves and other people. Yeah, and that it's not, like, it was always really important for me that it was accessible for everybody, so that it, there's a registration fee. It was always comparable to if you wanted to take swimming lessons, right? It was never going to be as expensive as hockey or anything like that. Right. But also, the company very quietly never turned anybody away for financial reasons. And we would go into schools and work with kids that weren't given this opportunity in other places. And then we would see these kids and say, okay, we're going to find a way to get them here, because this is what they need. They haven't found, their parents have tried other things, or their parents haven't been able to try other things. And the kids just haven't found their people or their stride. So we would find ways to bring them here. So that was always really important as well, so that it was a safe place for everybody, not just the kids whose parents could afford it, but for anyone. And that was huge. Yeah. Yeah. Tell me about the class you started because of the hooligans hanging out back. The hooligans. The sweet little children. Yeah. They really were. I think it's funny because in a lot of, I think that they thought we were going to look at them as the little hooligans, and they were going to have the police. So we moved into this building in 2011, I think it was, and it was before we'd even bought the building. And one of the first classes I was teaching, it was an evening, and we were in the basement studio, and it's got windows looking out onto the street level on Queen Street. And I was down there teaching an acting class. We were just hanging out. It was, the kids were like 7 and 9 year olds. And then suddenly we noticed that the windows facing the street were sliding open and the screen popped in and there were a bunch of little faces looking at us. And I looked at them and we were all very, surprised. And especially the kids I was with, they're like, ah. And the kids looked at me. The kids looking in the window looked at me, and there were lots of swear words, like, uh-oh, there's somebody in here. But imagine how they would have phrased it. And they took off. So I said to the kids I was with, just hang on just 1 second. So I went out our side door onto Queen Street, and there were a group of probably 10 to 12 young middle school age kids there. And it was dark, and it's funny, they were the same age that my brother and I were when my mom started our company. So when I'm talking about, finding something for kids to do, exactly the route that I think my mom was thinking. So I said to them, hey, you guys, what are you doing? And they were very much thinking that I was about to yell at them and call the police because they were breaking into the building. Mm-hmm. And I said to them, no, I'm not mad at you. And they were like, and they were throwing language at me. And I was like, just calm down. I'm not upset, but we have a front door. They're like, what do you mean? And I said, well, we have a front door. You don't need to come through the window. You're welcome anytime to come through the front door that we're open. And they were that wasn't the reaction they expected whatsoever. And I said to them, do you guys go to the school around the corner? And I said the name of the school. And they said, yeah. And I said, is so-and-so your principal? And they were like, yeah. And I said, well, why don't I give him a call tomorrow and see if maybe you guys can come and take some classes? And they were like, oh, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, there's an acting class going on right now, but we also have music classes and dance classes. And, their minds were blown a little bit. So the next morning I called the principal, who I knew because he had been a principal at other schools where I had been doing some outreach work. And I told him what happened. And he was like, whoa. And he thought I was calling to, how are we going to solve this problem? And in fact, I was calling to say, let's solve this problem together. Yeah. So that was the beginning of this amazing program where, you worked with the kids. I worked with them. Sarah Johnson was working with them, doing dance with them, and Chuck. And they would come every Friday and take classes and walk through that front door and feel welcomed. And it was interesting because it was Friday afternoons. They were probably exhausted from a full week of school. And they would always have a TA with them. And I remember year after year, the TA, it was always like a different TA, would come over to me at one point during these classes and say, these kids are so different here than they are at school. I was like, well, yeah, we're doing what we do.
The magic of theater.
It is. And that's just, I use that story a lot to talk about why it was so important for InterAction to be at this location. Yeah. And to talk about what we did and what continues to happen here. But that's just one of probably 100 stories similar to that, where we would go out into the community and see these kids. And they weren't necessarily kids that were going to break into the basement of an old church, but just kids who were, for whatever reason, needed this. And so we found ways to give it to them. And there you go.
Ta-da!
And you're still doing it.
Yeah, and we're still doing it.
And we did seniors programs too.
Yeah.
We weren't finding seniors breaking into the building or anything like that.
Not yet.
No. But, it's just, there's always something for everybody.
There is always, and it never ends. We have so many ideas, and it's always exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Thanks for talking with me today.
Thanks for hanging out with me. I like what you've done with this room.
Thanks. I know, the light is
naturally. The light is lovely.
Lovely,
yeah. Yeah. I'm never in here anymore.